0 to 60 can define a performance car, but it's the fastest 60 to 0 that's the aim of Tarok's brakes. From road cars to race cars, circuits, special stages, or the autostrada, nothing reduces speed like Tarok's brakes. Italy gave the world the art of Da Vinci and Michelangelo. Tarok's has given drivers the art of stopping. For more information and to acquire your own masterpiece, visit tarox.co.uk.
Yes, it's me, Mark Stone, and this is the Backseat Driver Podcast.
I'd like to introduce to the Backseat Driver Radio Show a fine young fellow from the North East, a chap called Brad Hoy. Brad, welcome to the Backseat Driver Radio Show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Now, it's quite an unusual thing. You've the Castle 3 Motor Company Limited. You've Castle 3 Hire. Where did all this passion for cars come from to start with?
Well, I've always been interested in cars since I was a kid, and over my lifetime I had some cars and often the points on my driving license to go with it. So as time went on, I got more interested in classic cars because you could have the thrill without the risk of losing your license so much. And so I was just into sort of MGs and that sort of stuff, affordable stuff. But I think, like most people, my head was turned when Morgan reintroduced the Morgan three-wheeler. Must have been 2012 or so. Yeah. 2011, 2012, and that really captured my imagination because it just looked like going back to the roots of motoring.
I mean, they're fantastic. They are a fascinating car if you look into the history of the Morgans and the three-wheelers. And in many ways, I thought it was a brave move to bring it back because it was an unknown quantity. Would people want to buy a three-wheeler Morgan with what was inherently a Harley-Davidson engine stuck up front?
No, that's right, and that was part of the drive for me to set up Castle 3 in the first place. Is that obviously Morgan is known for his British heritage, but when you looked at the car, it was basically an S&S Harley-Davidson engine strapped to the front, as you say, linked to an MX-5 gearbox. So, although it's still a lot of fun, and I got the impression that they perhaps put it together in a hurry, shall we say. And, I own one of those cars today, and seeing its reliability and the reliability of that other owners have, that would appear to be the case. And it seems to be enthusiasts that have come up with a lot of the improvements that keep the cars on the road.
Now, before we progress on, besides that you're hiring that car out, you also have a rather nice Series 3 Land Rover that you hire out.
No, absolutely. So that was a car I just acquired this summer. I think, again, they're coming back into vogue a bit, and the younger generation are liking to drive around in that thing. It's it's a canvas top, so you can take it to the beach and stuff like that. So that was the idea behind that.
I mean, the ironic thing is, you look at the new Defender, and I was on the launch of the new Defender, and though there's inherently nothing wrong with it, as I said to a friend of mine, or two friends of mine who run what I call proper Land Rovers, I said, the real Land Rover has nothing to fear from the new Defender. I said, it is not a modern take on it. I said, in my opinion, it's a warmed up Disco 2. I said, so the real Land Rover, since Land Rover discontinued them, they've done them a favour. The popularity of them and the value of them has absolutely soared.
No, absolutely. I mean, they were iconic, and we've seen pictures of these things in deserts and up top of mountains and God knows where. From the 50s and 60s, which sort of evoked that sort of romantic era of discovery and what have you. But you're right. Coming out with a modern looking supermarket dash car, it does go against the brand a little bit. But I think that's the case with a lot of motors these days, and I think that's a good thing in so much as the younger generations therefore still have an interest in older vehicles and driving them and getting the true sensation of driving.
Yeah. Now, to return to the Morgans, it's interesting that your experience with the new Morgan three-wheeler prompted you to decide to build your own three-wheelers, hence the Castle 3 Motor Company Limited. I mean, what made you buy a Morgan then think I'll build my own?
Well, as I said, when it was launched back in 2012, I probably took myself down to our local Morgan dealer and went out for a test drive, and I was impressed with the experience, but I wasn't overly impressed with the price, to be honest. And that was when it first came out. You could probably add another £10,000 or £15,000 to that today, to what they were launched at.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, well, I looked at, and by that time I sort of had the bug, the sort of open air three-wheeler bug, just everything that went with it. I've never driven motorcycles. I don't have a motorcycle license, but I always wanted to, and I felt that it was probably as close to that experience as I could get with a car license and without killing myself too quickly. So I looked at who else was making them and kit manufacturers and all the rest of it, and everywhere I went, there was waiting lists, 12 and 18 month waiting lists for kits or anything else. People like Tri-King and others were, all had long waiting lists. So I thought there was obviously a demand for this sort of thing, particularly well priced and well designed. So I thought to myself, and I don't have an automotive experience or an engineering experience. I have worked in business most of my working life, but I thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them. I wonder if it's worth trying to raise some money to put a little company together with a collection of like-minded people with a view to building something that could compete with all these that are out there, including the Morgan, but make it meet the demand that's there. So crowdfunding was in vogue at about the same time, since the sort of 2013, and I launched a campaign on Crowdcube, which is like a platform for crowdfunding, and that was fully funded.
Yeah.
That was at the time was looking for sort of £300,000 or so to set up a full-blown company that could produce a prototype and ultimately get into a factory and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, we were unsuccessful with that. A lot of people did come forward, but we didn't raise as much money as we hoped. So we trimmed it back and ended up pulling together a modest amount of money, and those people who were prepared to put the money in still wanted to go ahead with the project. I mean, it increased the risk a lot higher, as well as the timeline, because trying to pull that together on such a small budget and virtually, if you like, in terms of without a factory and using external supplies in terms of build and all the rest of it, obviously made the project a lot more problematic.
Because one of the other well-known three-wheeler companies is Pembleton, and I mean they seem to do all right as what you might call a virtual cottage industry in their own way.
No, and I have a lot of respect for those guys, and I would actually say that since I started Castle 3 back in 2013, that they've probably gone a good way to fill the gap.
Yeah,
that I was looking to fill, because they were at the time sort of offering strange-looking 2CV-based kits, and you still see them around, and they have a good following, but it wasn't really my cup of tea. But if you look at what they produce now and their latest version of it, and it's probably around the price that the Morgan three-wheeler was when it first came out, sort of 25 or so. It seems to me that they have a great little package there, and it gets a great write-up. But I always think that these. I used to get a lot of questions when we were trying to raise the money in terms of competition, but I don't think I see all these products as complementary.
Yeah.
We don't have one BMW. We have BMW or Audi or Jaguar. You have those choice, and each one feeds off the other. Each one has a slight different following. So I don't see any of these people as competitors necessarily in their own right. Not least because a lot of these vehicles have very enthusiastic following.
So, I mean, does a Castle 3 exist? Is there a prototype? And if so, I mean, who designed the shall we say the prototype?
Yeah, well, initially it was a student called Charlie Purvis from Newcastle University. Was at the automotive design degree course there, and he was a friend of my son's. And also, he had a secondment at a local Northumberland-based motorcycle design company, which unfortunately is no longer in existence. And he took it on as a sort of intern project, and he came out with some, really, really nice designs. And I used those renders as in the business plan to raise money for the, for the company in the first place.
Yeah.
We then, as ever, turning that into reality on a tight budget became more complicated. So the car that we have, yes, we do have a running car. It's not registered for the road as yet, and it still needs some work to get it roadworthy. And it's as much to test the components and the setup and the engine as anything else. So right now it's not the best looking thing in the world, but it runs. And it's a bit of a mule. So I think it's there. But it needs money to complete it, and hence the hire business.
Yeah.
We sharp burn through the money that we raised crowdfunding, and I've put probably too much of my own money into it. So it was a case of how can I make some money to plow back into the business, and the thought of owning cars and hiring them out to do that, seemed fairly risk free because you've always got the value of the cars to fall back on. So that's the nemesis of the hire business to bolt onto the side is to fund that and try to get the thing complete.
So the Castle 3, I mean, what engine is in this? I mean, how far shall we say? I know it's a mule and everything else, and mules never do look good. I've seen plenty of prototypes in my time. But, I mean, is the engine that you've put in it the engine that you would like to put in the production cars, or else is it just something you've dropped in to give it power?
Yes, it's that. It's just a Honda 650 DeVille engine. We took the decision fairly early on to mount the engine inside rather than internally. Although I do like the external up front look, like the Morgan three-wheeler, it does limit you in terms of power unit. To have a nice V-twin, there's only so many of them out there, and a lot of them are quite expensive.
Yeah.
So we took the engine into a regular bonnet, a bit like the Morgan F-Type.
Yeah.
Or, the BSA three-wheeler,
And, well, I mean, just putting a lot of the Morgan three-wheelers, when you look at them back in the 20s and 30s, a lot of them actually had what you would call an internal engine. There was only certain of them had the Japs, etc., mounted right at the front where you could see them.
No, exactly. So, there was that tradition. And, I admitted to say that when I said looking to set the company up, I was looking at three-wheeler companies that were around back in the day. These vehicles were very popular either side of the First World War.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of research of companies that were around at the time that made three-wheelers. And obviously some of them, like BSA, the names still exist. You can't, you couldn't consider taking that on. But I came across Castle 3, which were originally in Kidderminster, and ran and made three-wheelers. But like a lot of those companies at the time, just after the war, couldn't survive and collapse. So I resurrected that name, and the Castle 3s that were made were of that structure as well. They had an internal engine. It wasn't up front like the Morgan. So there was a certain amount of keeping with the tradition of the original company as well there that forces. But we thought if we go into production, it's more likely to be on a bespoke basis where people specify the car they want.
Yeah.
And within reason, if you can choose the engine, in the same way as a Caterham, I suppose. Yeah. You've got pretty much the same layout, but you can have something tiny in there or something significant that makes the whole thing very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, just out of interest, do any original Castle 3s still exist?
Yeah, they do. There's a few in ownership, and I think I've never been there to see it, but I think in in Kidderminster, I think, that has a Castle 3, and I think maybe the Castle 4 as well, because they had a very short time building four-wheel cars as well, but not as many. I think that was about the time the company collapsed.
Yeah. But, I mean, you only have to look, with all what's going on with the plague, and I'm involved with vintage and historic cars, courtesy of a good friend of mine. It's interesting that the French cycle cars, many of which are, shall we say, along the same lines, even down to the fact the guy who's actually steering it and driving it sits behind the passenger because they're two-seaters. There is a sudden resurgence in these, what you would call, motorcycle-based cars, because ultimately the Morgan three-wheeler is interesting. If you put just the driver in, it competes as a motorcycle. If you put a passenger in, it competes as a motorbike and sidecar. They can actually compete competitively in a whole host of classes, dependent on how many people are sat in them.
No, that's right, and I think that's part of the popularity. And I think in my own mind, at least, I don't make distinction between three and four wheels when it comes to that sort of vehicle. From a modern day production perspective, it gets a little bit more difficult because obviously going into my understanding of the regulations that go into sort of four-wheel production is quite complex. Suddenly you're a car, whereas the regulations relating to motorcycles aren't as bad. You don't have to have airbags and crumple zones and all that sort of stuff. And so it's slightly easier to build from scratch in terms of regulations. That said, the Castle 3 that we have now, the prototype, it hasn't been through a vehicle association test yet. So
type approval, as they refer to it.
Yeah. Well, it won't be type approval, I don't think, but at least as a single vehicle, as a one-off. If you want to get off the road, it's going to have to, on the road to test drive.
Yeah.
But I think we'll find a test track in the first instance to take it on without, so it doesn't have to be road registered.
So, shall we say, to the bones of the vehicle, is it built on a chassis? And, I mean, what have you used to construct the bodywork?
All right, so yes, it's a ladder chassis, but we've got a tubular sort of space frame around that, that sits on top of that, and then it's clad in aluminium.
All right, good.
So quite traditional in that, front. We wanted to stick with tradition, didn't really want to go down the GRP front or anything like that. Yeah. And also it's rear-wheel drive. A lot of people like the Pembleton because it's front-wheel drive, and it's certainly a lot easier to make, and there are a lot of benefits from that. Yeah. But a lot of traditionalists like the rear-wheel drive, perhaps not so much when they find themselves facing the wrong way. That's all part of the mix. It's all what I was saying earlier in terms of the complementarity of these companies that are out there rather than the competition. Yeah.
I mean, one vehicle I was involved with as regards a little bit of promotion and things like that was the Polaris Slingshot, which follows the same route. I mean, the benefit of like the Morgan three-wheelers and the Pembletons is it's two wheels at the front, one at the back. And everybody takes the mick out of Reliance and things like that. I had a young lad on a few weeks ago, Lewis Buchan, who restores Reliance. I think the thing is with three-wheelers, though the Polaris Slingshot, it was too futuristic to be popular in England. It was also too damned expensive to be popular in England, but it had 2.4 litre, 4 cylinders sat up front. So, shall we say, from the bulkhead forward, it was a modern car. The one thing about three-wheelers is, especially two at the front, one at the back, you have got to come up with a new driving style. I thoroughly enjoy driving them, but you cannot drive them like a normal car. There's a different way of driving these vehicles, and that's part of the fun of them.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and arguably it is more genuine because, you've got one wheel at the back of driving gives you more control than two split from a differential. You could argue, a lot of traditionalists wouldn't agree with that necessarily, but if you think, it's more true to the dynamics of driving to have one driven wheel at the back than two. But but at the same time, you do get a lot of people say that they didn't even realise they were in a three-wheeler. Yeah, they didn't get any sense of that. Once you're looking forward, you have no idea that there's only one wheel behind you.
I think where people suddenly do realise if you're pressing on down a country road or on a circuit and things like that, that when you're cornering fast, you set them up for the corner and you will pick up or you'll dangle in the air the inside front wheel if you're doing it correctly. That's just before you gently swap ends.
Yes, yeah, it's a bit disconcerting if that happens. And I must say, I've seen photographs of that in the older Morgans, but thankfully, I think never done that in the modern day one.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Morgan you've got it's like you said, you were inspired by the fact that the Morgan is A, expensive, B, and no disrespect to Morgan. I mean, I own a Morgan, but I own a 4.4, one with a wheel at each corner. But you accept that Morgans are... I mean, the new Morgans have gone all aluminium and everything else, but they're now seeking out a different market. They're seeking out the Porsche owner. But if you drive a traditional Morgan, you do accept that... the flex, the twist. I mean, I was out in mine last night and it came on raining hard, so you put the roof up, but many times putting the roof up's a bit self-defeating because you still get water inside. The steering is like trying to bend an iron bar at parking speeds. You realise that they have all these inherent faults of cars designed 70 years ago, which you accept. But I think the one thing you found with your new Morgan three-wheeler is, for what it cost, the build wasn't there.
No, I mean, I do. Yes, and I think I think people can accept all those foibles that you talk about, and indeed that is part of the charm of the car. But you don't want to be breaking down every time you go out on it.
No.
Or don't, you don't have the confidence to take it on a long trip. Now, I see people take these, the length and breadth of New Zealand or whatever. People do long trips on them, but they tend to have a support. Either they have modified the cars themselves and understand the entire workings of the car, so they can work on it en route if anything goes wrong, or they have a support team. There was a group that took one up to the Arctic Circle just after it was launched, but they had a complete Morgan squad with them in a van. I think most people do like tinkering on a little bit, and that's what I liked about the MGB sort of thing.
Yeah.
Even if you go with the basic knowledge, you can tinker. I think people do like to tinker, but it's that confidence thing that has sort of knocked my feelings towards the Morgan. Is that do I really want to take it up to the north of Scotland on a long weekend? Even if the weather's good, well, probably not, because will we get there? Which is, I think, is a bit of a shame. That's.
Well, not being funny, you buy a new car, and yes, you do expect a warranty, a 2-year warranty, things like that. What you don't expect is to have to employ the services of an entire factory backup crew on them.
No, exactly. So it's just finding that balance. Now, mine is an early car. My Morgan is a 2012, so it was one of the first. So,
yeah.
And they have improved greatly since, but they are still not without their issues. All the Morgan types that I follow on Instagram, you're more likely to see pictures of them on the back of a trailer than you are. Which again is not to knock them, as it is part of the charm, but I think it normally wears off a little bit.
And I mean, it's a bit like with the Castle 3. I think Morgan, as I said, I thought Morgan were brave bringing it out, and it gained instant popularity.
Yeah.
But you would expect on a modern car for them to have actually built into it reliability, because the stories you hear on the Morgan three-wheelers, love them as I do, you think, were these too hastily designed and launched? Whereas from what you're saying about the Castle 3, when it does launch, of course I do hope it does launch, it will have had all its little foibles ironed out.
No, that's right, and and at the same time, I'm sure Morgan couldn't afford to take 7 years over it, which we've done so far. But they wanted to get out in the market, and it didn't help that there was a lot of hype around it, and they created the demand before they could really fulfill it. But so yes, that's I suppose it's a classic case. You probably wouldn't start from here, and I'm sure obviously Morgan's certainly under different ownership and to a certain extent different management now than it was then.
Yeah.
And I've no doubt if they were to do it again, they would probably do it a little bit different. As you say, with the new architecture that's going into their new four-wheel cars, they are a modern-day manufacturing company with sort of traditional roots.
Well, I mean, the one thing that the new Morgan does have compared to mine is actually is suspension, because if you go out in my 4.4, I mean, you've cart springs at the back. You do have telescopic dampers, and you've still got the sliding pillars at the front. And I've always said, if you drive over a 50p piece, you know whether it was heads or tails. I mean, you don't drive a straight line down the modern roads, because what you do is you've got to avoid the potholes.
Yes.
Otherwise, you find the base of your spine starting to come adrift from the rest of your anatomy.
But that's right, and that's another issue with the three-wheeler, of course, is that now you've got potholes in the middle of the road. You can't just straddle
no, you can't avoid them at speed ups. No,
you're going to get exactly. So it does all adds to the fun. And there are times I've thought I'd better check, get out and check the chassis cracks after that. Because sometimes you do get quite a wallet. Yeah.
But to go back to your Land Rover, I mean, your two hire cars, as you say, when they're not hired out, do you use them both, or do you park them up and use a modern?
No, I absolutely use them myself. Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the justification, I suppose, is that, I mean, they're two extreme cars in terms of, they don't have a lot in common, but they're both great fun to have. And we live near the coast here in Northumberland, and to use the old Land Rover to take the dog out down to the beach for walks and things like that in the summer is just fantastic, with the canvas rolled up, and it's just a great experience. And I mean, you don't go anywhere fast, of course, but again, it's back to what I was saying at the beginning. That's kind of part of the charm.
Yeah, I mean, we want to go back to my Morgan 4.4. I mean, I rarely drive, apart from on the motorway, where I sit at 60 and 70. Mine has the 1.8 blacktop Ford Z-Tech under its bonnet. It's inherently a vintage Mondeo, but I tend to find you don't actually want to drive them fast.
Yes, no, exactly. Yeah, and again, it's just it's part of the fun, part of the experience, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As regards the hire, which is the more popular of the two vehicles?
I would say it's probably 50-50, and we also do a bit of wedding work.
Yeah.
They're quite popular for weddings, and of course we have a few places here again on the coast that do sort of beach weddings, and I think with the popularity of the Land Rover, a lot of people are sort of looking for that look.
Yeah.
And the photographs of we've just turned up to the beach to get married in the old Series 3 Land Rover. It's part of that tradition I was talking about in terms of the iconic look of the old Land Rover.
Yeah. I suppose on the weddings, getting a bride into the Morgan three-wheeler could prove somewhat tricky.
No, that's right, but I have seen them do it, and it is possible. Yes, but gentlemen need to look away though.
And I mean, I haven't driven a modern Morgan three-wheeler, but a friend of mine has a Series 2A Land Rover, and I used to own Series 3s and Series 3 lightweights. They're not modern to drive, so if somebody hires them, do you give them a little driving lesson before they go out in either of them?
No, absolutely, absolutely in both. I mean, it's slightly different. I mean, you're absolutely right with the Land Rover. The travel in the steering is quite wrong. The gearbox is like driving a bus. There's a pretty long reach on that.
Well, the only problem is in them, if it's anything like the ones I had, reverse first and third, there's about 0.1 of a millimetre between them all.
That's right. No, absolutely. And I've got a big reminder sticker of the gear selector posted on the bulkhead as well, so people don't forget. And again, with the Morgan, it's more a case of enjoy it, but don't bloody kill yourself. You don't have those. There's no ABS. There's no traction control. There's no airbag. If you hit it, you will hit the tree if you're not careful. Yeah, you might be enjoying the countryside. If you're not careful, you'll be part of it. Yeah, exactly. As I said, that's not to put people off the experience.
I think with the Land Rover, the experience that I've always said, if you've never driven one, set off in second. They will happily set off in second.
Yes.
If you insist on first, just let the thing creep a little bit, because you might discover you're going backwards when you weren't intending to.
That's right. No, it is quite forgiving on that basis. To be fair, I mean, even third, you can pull away in third on a slight hill as well. So yeah, they are very forgiving from that perspective. But yeah, I think the most alarming thing is the steering. It might be mine specifically, but yes.
Oh yeah, you definitely steer a Series 3 and its predecessors in a straight line. You don't sit there with one hand just gently on the two fingers on the spoke and cruise in a straight line. They don't do that.
Absolutely. You look like something from a 1950s movie when someone's driving. It's constantly moving the wheel. But yeah, again, all part of the charm, in my view.
Now, just out of interest, with the plague that, of course, nobody was anticipating, how is business? Are they still hiring out? Are people still interested in coming and taking them?
Yeah, it's been fairly quiet since we came out of lockdown. But I think Northumberland, like most places, has experienced a sort of record August and September in terms of visitors.
Yeah.
So yes, from that point of view, fine. Obviously, people are worried about, wiping the car down and all that sort of thing. But of course, all those procedures are in place.
And I mean, plague aside, do you intend increasing your hire fleet?
Well, it's one of those things that could grow out as a separate entity. It really depends on the demand and what else to add to it. I often think. We mentioned Caterham 7 earlier. I often think a Caterham would be a nice sort of gap filler between the two, to be honest. Yeah. Two can cruise okay and take a touring. We tend only to get day hires, especially with the Morgan or even half days.
Yeah.
People don't tend to want to go away with it.
Well, I think the problem is when you discover that the best thing you can take out on a Morgan three-wheeler, the biggest thing, is probably a toilet bag, and that's roughly about it.
That's right, yeah. And, you don't really want to, well, most people don't really want to be buffeted that way for hours on end. It's nice to take round the lanes for a day.
And you've got to point out to them, of course, this thing has no roof.
Exactly, yes. So, yeah. Foul weather gear is a necessity.
Now, just out of interest, if you don't mind me asking, how much does it cost to hire the Land Rover and hire the Morgan?
They're not too bad. It ranges, obviously in times and what have you, and season. But it's somewhere between £200 and £300 a day.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not. I mean, I'm not saying it's cheap, but the biggest problem we have is insurance costs.
Yeah.
We have to have an insurance policy in place that covers everybody, and that's not cheap.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's, and then of course you've got to keep the cars well serviced and maintained. So it's not pure profit, but obviously I need to make something.
Yeah.
To plough back into. So yeah, it's just trying to pitch it right, I think.
Yeah,
is the difficulty, and we still adjust prices on a regular basis just to try to get it right.
Mind the benefit of the service costs on the Land Rover, the only thing you need is a big screwdriver and a hammer as a rule for a Land Rover.
It's pretty much that rule. Anyway, yeah. But I did have a brake cylinder go just a couple of weeks ago, and finding someone who was prepared to do it was difficult. But when they eventually found someone and it was done, it was only £100. I can't remember the last time I ever got a car back from a garage and the bill was only £100. That's including your VAT. So, yeah, that was.
Do you think you'll be able to take your three-wheeler project forward? I know it's very dependent on cash, but do you think with what's going on, people will still be interested? Because more people now want to stay in England.
No, that's right, and I think that's where we are at the next stage. I think we need to get to a stage where we're comfortable with the car on the road, make it look more aesthetically pleasing, so that we can promote it more.
Yeah,
and then it has to be a combination, I think, of trying to raise more money to build a couple, get someone to encourage someone to place an order, bespoke order.
Yeah,
really, and build it to their spec. I think that's where. The two parallel projects right now are just to finish the roadworthiness and to get it looking the part. So that at least people can have some idea of how their final model might look.
So basically, Brad, if somebody wants to find out about the hire cars or look into the Castle 3 three-wheeler project, is there a website for it? I know you've got Instagram, but are there any other outlets?
Yeah, we have a website. It's just Castle 3. That's the written word 3. All one word. .co.uk, and there's information on there both about the hire and the build project. So yeah, it's all on there.
Yeah.
I try to keep as updated as possible.
Right, but I truly wish you all the best. I mean, I would love at some point to come and actually have a look at the prototype just to see what it's like. More than I know you said it's not as really as it would be, but it would be nice to see one.
There are photos out there, but we haven't been actively promoting it. But you will see it on the Instagram feed. So we have two Instagram accounts. One's Castle 3, and the other one is Castle 3 Hire. But certainly, if you look at the Castle 3 account, you'll see a lot more about the build of the car over the years.
Brad Hoy, thanks very much for joining me on the Backseat Driver Radio Show. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
No, at all. Thank you, Mark.
Rarely beaten on price, never beaten on service. Whether it's cars, bikes or commercials, Hodder Tyres are the best in the business. And when it comes to tyre expertise and advice to supplying the correct tyres for your vehicle's specific requirements, nobody comes close to David Lakin and the Hodder Tyres team. So give them a call on 01200 613 192 or visit the website at hoddertyres.co.uk.